Hey guys, in today's video, I thought we should be looking into getting that film look that everybody talks about. So we're gonna try out two methods. The first one is basic things that you can do in Davinci Resolve yourself. And we're gonna add some film grain, which requires the studio version, but you can leave that out and you still have all the other functionality. And the second thing that we're gonna try out is using the plugin Dehancer, which I really love. I'm not sponsored, they are not sponsoring this video, but I am an affiliate, so you can check out the description below for an affiliate link, which helps me out and saves you a little bit of money as well. So without much further said, let's jump into Davinci Resolve and get started. We are inside Davinci and we are gonna look at doing it the manual way first. So first thing I want to do is I want to apply a color space transform to my first node. We don't really need to do this step, but I'm gonna implement it in all of my grades moving forward. So we are going to convert from my Canon Cinema Gamut, Canon C-Log 3, to Davinci Wide Gamut and Davinci Intermediate, which means that we need another node. We're going to move that over here, copy the effect, and then we're going to switch these around. So taking it from Davinci Intermediate to Rec 709 and Gamma 2.4. All right, so now we have a Davinci Wide Gamut color space that we're working within. So the first thing I want to do is I want to correct our image. I'm going to put in some contrast here. This shot was overexposed, but it is quite perfect for this film look. Let's just go back a little bit here. I think we want to look around here because we have some highlights and some shadows that we want to maintain. We're going to move into our primaries here in our second node, and we are just going to pull down the offset a little bit, then pull down the left quite a bit, and we want to pull down the gain a little bit as well. Pull up the offset a little bit once more. The gamma adjustment. This clip is a little bit tricky to work with. So let's just see in the darkest parts, it still looks okay, I think. Maybe pull up the gamma a little bit and then pull down the gain some more. And then in the brightest parts here, I think it looks pretty well as well. So let's just see what we have to work with here. I think that image looks pretty good from an overexposed look to a rather normal one. So this is our correction. This is inside the color space that we're working with the contrast curve and some exposure changes. We got a pretty nice image to work with. This was shot on my Canon R6 with the 7200 at 200 millimeters at f2.8, I believe. And I didn't mean to overexpose it, but that's what happened. I messed up some settings, but luckily we can still save the shot. And I think it looks really good for this film look because Grit, my friend here, is wearing this purple shirt and she has this towel and those sunglasses and everything just looks quite film-like. It was shot in Bali. So how do we get the film look now? Actually, I just want to apply a LUT that's built into Davinci. So I'm just going to apply one more node over here after our Rec 709 conversion. Go into LUTs, go down to film looks. And we're going to look at this Rec 709 Kodak 2383 D60. I honestly haven't looked that much into film looks, so I don't know exactly what these settings are, but testing it out before, it worked pretty good with this one. And as I read this one, it expects Rec 709, and that's what we converted for right before. So everything should be good. I know some people use Cineon in the gamma, and I don't actually know how much of a change that makes. Well, it makes it look a lot better. So that's probably the right approach. So changing the output gamma to Cineon film lock, that made the trick. So I actually think this looks pretty good. Like this is a pretty solid film look. I think it really achieved some cool colors with getting this film look on. The only thing I want to add, and that's what I said in the beginning, that's the paid thing in Davinci, is putting on some film grain. So we're just gonna do some film grain here. Apply that. I think we're gonna go with the 60 millimeters 50D. And I'm just gonna zoom in a bit to see what we're actually doing up here. I like finer grain. So I think we wanna play around with the settings a little bit. Texture, I'm gonna leave around where it was. The grain size, I'm gonna pull down a little bit. The same thing with the aspect ratio. The strength, I then wanna pull up a little bit, but not too far. Somewhere around here. Might want to look at the softness. I like it a little bit more softened, and I think that looks pretty good. It's very subtle, so we might actually want to go in and increase the size a little bit again, like so, and apply some more strength. just to actually get that more film look. But said again, I do like it to be a little bit more subtle. So I think this looks pretty good. You can especially see it in the highlights and the shadows up here. I think that's a pretty cool look. It was shot in 60 frames per second and then slowed down by 50%. So I really like how this is turning out. Just from very few settings, we didn't really do that much. I think this is a great way to try and achieve the kind of film look that we had back in the day. So that's a way to pretty easy without many adjustments, and actually with the free LUTs built inside of Davinci, which is quite incredible, you can achieve this look very, very easily. You could play around with the highlights a little bit more and the shadows, of course, with our adjustments in here. That's something that we could easily go around and work with, but I think for this tutorial today, or this video today, we're just going to leave it at that. Now we're going to jump into our Dehancer plugin, but first I want to go into our first frame here. I'm just going to grab a still, because then we can match up that still with our second shot. And I'm actually going to drag one more from when she's sitting down here like this, I think. So we have two stills that we can then compare to afterwards. So let's jump into our second timeline. It's basically the same timeline. I just copied it, and now we're going to use Dehancer plugin instead. So we're going to do a lot of the same things, and we might actually go in and just steal our corrections from the first clip. So if we click the clip here, copy paste onto this one, then we have a pretty good starting point. So we're just going to delete the film look and the grain, and we are going to put it back to being camera 2.4. There we go. And now we're back to a pretty standard look again. No grain, no film look, just the pure colors. So now we're going to apply a node again after our Rec 709, at least in this case. And then we're going to search for Dehancer. Need to drag this over a little bit, pull on the Dehancer plugin. And right off the bat, you can see it does a lot of things. If you turn this off and on again, you can see a lot is happening. Now we have set the source to Rec 709. So we're just going to leave it at that. But the cool thing about this plugin is that you could actually choose camera, then Canon, then go in and choose the R6 and the exact settings, log cinema gamut that we shot with. So we could get that exact look from just doing that. We are just going to leave it at Rec 709 for today. Going in, we can change some of these settings, but to begin with, I'm just going to leave this alone. Then go down and say, okay, which film LUT do we want on or look? And right now it sets to Kodak Vision Free 250D. I actually like the Kodak Portra 400 a lot and the look that that gives. So I'm going to apply that one. And we can see from down here that it's cut off our highlights and our shadows quite a bit. You can see how it's stretched out a little bit more now when we have turned it off. So we're going to see if we can fix some of that. So we have the expand here, and I'm actually going to drag down or up the black point to get some darker blacks. And I'm going to pull down the white point as well to get a little bit more work here in the highlights. And we might just want to drag it up a little bit more to get somewhere like this. You can see it's quite a dramatic effect already. It has a lot of grain in it, so I think we're going to fix that in a second. As said before, I like a little bit more of a subtle look. Now we can go to the print look and print profiles. And remember before we used the Kodak 2383 print film LUT, so we can actually apply that here as well and get sort of the same settings. Not entirely, but it's getting there. And I might actually go up and just look at our expansion a little bit again here. Make sure that our waveform down there looks good. And I think this is pretty solid. So I like to put on this profile, see how the target white makes it one or the other. And there's so many things you can do with this plugin, so we can't really go through all of it. But I think the tonal contrast could be a little bit raised just a little bit for this one. I think that looks pretty good. Color head, gonna leave that alone. Now we come to the film grain. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit as we did before, and I'm gonna turn down the amount of grain a little bit because I like it, as said, to be more subtle. I'm gonna play around with how much grain is in the shadows and the midtones and everywhere else. So for the midtones, I'm just gonna turn it down quite a bit. I do like it to be in the shadows. And then for the highlights, I think we can leave it around where it was. So you can see if we turn that on and off, now it's way more subtle. It's definitely still there, and it's a more dramatic look than we had before. We could turn it down even more, but let's just leave it at this. Halation, not sure we want to use that for this one. Let's just zoom in a little bit and see what that does. It makes kind of this halation effect around some of the highlights. What I want to put on instead is actually the bloom effect. I really like how that makes all of this highlights and the bright points a little bit more gloomy. So we're just going to turn it down a little bit because I don't want it to be way too much. Turn up the details a little bit and then see, really like how this just makes everything look a little bit more, to me at least, film look style. So you can see this is before and this is what we're getting with this plugin. As I said, you can do so many things. So we're just touching the outer edges of what you can do. Could turn on some vignette as well, but I think we're just going to leave it off. And I think that's what I want to do for this one, just to keep it short and nice. But you can see how much this plugin really did when we turn it up to full screen. This is quite a dramatic effect, especially if we go to the first frame. You can really see how it turned everything way more film-like than we had before. I really love how this plugin makes everything so easy, and you could see how it was just a few sliders. Obviously, I've spent some time playing around with the plugin before to see how it works and figure out the small things, but it's definitely worth checking out. So what I want to do now before we end this video is just to go in and say, if we now compare this to the other one that we had, so let's go to the first frame, put on our wipe effect, and then check this one. Now you can see that on the right side, we have our own grade, and on the left side, we have what we just did with the Dehancer plugin. And you can see it's quite a lot more of an effect we did on the Dehancer one. It's a way more powerful plugin than what we just did with a few adjustments ourselves. You can see how everything blends together very nicely. But I do think that the look that we created ourselves is pretty good as well. You can see how we've messed around a little bit more with the highlights and they look a little bit more toned down. You can also see how they are being clipped on the second one. When we drag it to the right, you can see how they're just being clipped at the top. So we could increase those a little bit if we wanted a different look. And let's go to our second scene here and just see if we can match up the frame. There we go. And you can see again how it's two different looks. I do like the Dehancer one more, but we did spend a little bit more time on that, and it is a powerful plugin, so that definitely makes a difference. But if we just look at the two side by side here, or maybe even make it top and bottom comparison, or a third one, you can really see how the effect is different from each other. I really like how both looks turned out, and as said, that's just two ways that you can try and achieve this more filmic look. The grain definitely adds something for me, and all the things that you can play around in Dehancer makes such a difference. So if it's something that you're doing quite often, or you want to get more into looking and making these film styles, I definitely recommend you check out Dehancer. You can buy some of the separate modules as well, or you can buy the full pack. It works for both Davinci Resolve, Final Cut, and Premiere Pro, I'm pretty sure. As said, this is not sponsored, but I'm an affiliate, so you can save a little bit of money on the link down in the description. And yeah, the only last note I want to say is that the plugin is pretty heavy on your computer, so you might want to turn on and off and settle in, like put in your look and then turn it off for the rest of your editing and then turn it on in the end before you export, because it is quite heavy on the playback when you try and play back the video that you've just done. So without much further said, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care.